not all fights are worth fighting. I like to fight. I don't get pushed around, but I pray that if I'm in a situation like that again, I hope I'm not. But if I am, I will sit on my hands and I will take the punishment rather than go into a war that I cannot win. If it's costing you your happiness, walk away. If someone is an entrepreneur and they decide or they understand that it's affecting their real happiness and you are not happy being an entrepreneur and it's affecting your life too much in a negative way, there's nothing wrong with walking away. Us entrepreneurs who are committed to this, right? I'm wired this way. I will stop until you take the last breath out of me. I'm part crazy. I'm part stupid. That's me. I'm wired for that. But not everyone is. And a lot of entrepreneurs will, again, we're the same mindset, like, no, you've got to stay the course. You've got to stick it out. You've got to be committed no matter what. You are the lesson. But I will say, not everyone is us.
Welcome back to Mic'd Up. I'm your host, Mike DiCioccio. And guys, our guest today is a decorated U.S. Army veteran and former federal special agent. He's turned full-time entrepreneur. He was raised in Northern California. He spent nearly 2 decades in high-stakes government roles, including serving as assistant special agent in charge and working with the FBI. After his government service, he founded JDub's Brewing Company, which was one of Florida's fastest-growing breweries, and also Lux Media, a digital marketing agency for dental practices and cosmetic surgeons. He's an inspirational speaker on resilience and authentic brand building, and he writes screenplays now. He acts, and he holds degrees from Troy University and the Nashville Film Institute. Welcome to the show, author of the brand new book, Business Shit, Lessons Learned from a Blue-Collar CEO, Jeremy JDub Joerger.
Dude, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that intro. My God, did you have a teleprompter? I had to learn that shit from you, man. Wow.
Don't tell all my secrets. I do have a little bit of help.
Golly, that was impressive. Thank you. I feel better about myself.
Dude, you're the man. You're the man. Just sit back and enjoy the show. I know our audience is going to really enjoy this one. You got, did you say off camera, 14 years experience now in business? Something like that, right?
Let's see. So I started 2013. So 12. I got 12 years, I guess. About 12 years.
Only 12? I thought it was 14. Get him off.
I was talking shit, man. I was just pumped. I thought
kick him out.
I thought there were some pretty girls in the room, so I resorted to what I normally do and lied and embellished. Whatever works.
You added 2 years. All right. Well, that's cool. Usually it's removing 2 years from your age, but I got you. Jeremy, appreciate you being on the show, dude. You're an awesome guy. I did peep your social media and your YouTube channel, and I thought it was really cool. We talked about your book in the intro. I actually saw that you're doing like the audio version, like the audiobook version of it, which is really cool.
Yep.
And there's like a behind the scenes of that. So I was kind of checking that out to get a little bit of insight. So when I talked to you, I kind of felt like I knew you more than, just a stranger, right? So people could check you out, man. Website, social media, it's all in the show notes, your YouTube channel. They can buy the book, click on the link in the show notes. Everything is live and ready to rock and roll.
Man, that's impressive. Thank you so much. And I'm horrible at self-promotion. So I'm trying to figure that out right now. But believe it or not, I'm good at I can build you up and get you out there. But as far as doing it for myself, man, I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah.
I get really nervous. So I'm not good at it. I'm not good at self-promotion, but I'm learning what the hell, so hopefully
I think that's a good thing. I think that's a good attribute because typically the people who are good at talking about themselves and we produce many, many, many podcast episodes. And once in a while you'll get someone who it's like, holy shit. Like they just could go off the rails for 3 hours just talking about themselves in that way. And it's to the point where it's a little bit, kind of rubs you the wrong way because it's a little bit over the top. So I do appreciate you being humble. I think you're a real dude, and that's why people on this show are going to love you for being here. And I just want to first off start with thanking you for your service. I think a lot of times people overlook it. They're like, oh yeah, he's a decorated veteran. No, dude. Thank you for your service, because you know what? You don't want people like me out there handling weaponry because I could barely handle like a BB gun. So thank you for guys like you who are badass and go out and who have done it. And speaking of being badass, can you share a story before we get into the entrepreneur stuff? Just something from being a special agent, anything cool that you could share that you're maybe a proud moment or something that you went through that you're like, I got to tell you this,
Wow. Whoa, what a great question. Listen, I was blessed. I was blessed to do a lot of things as a federal agent, and so one of the things I became very specialized in white collar crime, right? And I fell into that. I'm not going to bore you with the background, but I was also trained as a protection agent, right? So I protected dignitaries for the U.S. government. So one of the things I got to do rather frequently was protect the Secretary of Defense.
Wow.
So I was in Ankara, Turkey, protecting the Secretary of Defense, and I'm in Ankara, Turkey. And I'm not gonna say which SecDef because it's nothing bad, but it was one of the Secretary of Defenses, and I'm in Ankara, Turkey, and so I'm the advanced team, and I'm in the capital. And there's this, and if you haven't been to Turkey, what a beautiful country, and just beautiful culture and beautiful people. I can't wait to go back. I went to Ankara, which is a city, I believe it's the capital, if not Istanbul, but anyway, it's a long time ago. But anyway, so I went to Ankara, and they have this big monument there, this big monument where all the dignitaries go and they visit. And these are like heads of states, right? And when they go there, and it's an enshrinement to one of their most noted figures in history, which they call him Ataturk, or Father Turk. And he was very significant in Turkey. And so this is a big monument built to him. And it's so cool. Side note to that, they actually have the roads are not beveled, but they have like the cobblestone roads, right? That you walk on, like the walkways. Mm-hmm. And they make it uneven intentionally so that you have to watch your step to bow your head in reverence while you're at this place, which I think is pretty cool. So anyways, they have this book there that these dignitaries sign, right? And so the dignitary gets on ground, and when they're there and they do the big, the camera thing, and they sign this book. Well, I was there as part of the advanced team, so I'm just making sure. And when you're a part of the advanced team, and you're protecting a dignitary, and this is Secret Service, this is Department of Defense, this is any protection agents. You get there, you do the advanced work, and there is a contingency plan for everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, absolutely everything. Should that dignitary get sick, should there be an attack somewhere, along the route or one of the locations, I know every safe room that there is. I know every route to get out of there.
And everybody's on the same page. Like if we go to plan B right away.
Yeah.
Boom,
and my
it's
job,
not talk about it. It's just execute right away.
That's right. And my job as an advanced agent or part of the advanced team is to know by the dignitaries there on the ground, if shit hits the fan at any point during their trip, I know their trip like the back of my hand, and I know every escape route. I know every safe place. I know every number that there is to call. So I got a plan for anything and everything that could happen to our dignitary. So you have to get on the ground for a certain amount of time and a significant amount of time beforehand to prepare for this. A lot goes into these things. And so I'm part of the advanced team. So I'm one of the few agents there preparing for the Secretary of Defense's arrival. Now, the SecDef at the time had a broken arm. So he had slipped on outside of his residence, outside of DC. There was ice on the ground. He slips, breaks his arm. So I'm there, and I'm part of the advanced team. So at this enshrinement to Ataturk, they have this book, and this big book that the dignitaries sign. And so, like the Pope has signed this thing, right. This, like I said, this is presidents. This is heads of state who sign this thing. And so they're getting ready and they're talking about what they're going to do. And I'm with some of their PR, the SecDef's PR folks, the civilians. And, they're getting ready and they're talking about him signing this book. And it's like, it's like, oh shit, he's got a broken arm. Mm-hmm. And it's an inscription. So you inscribe, it's not just, you don't just sign your name, you put, on behalf of the American people or whatever it might be.
Right.
So we're there and it's like, we're doing the advance. We're at this book, and the thing's roped off and it's got guards, and the Pope's in there and all these other people. And so the lady goes, the PR gal says, oh God, he's got a broken arm. He can't inscribe this thing. And she looks at me and she goes, how's your handwriting? And I'm not going to, fucking A. I said, well, it's good. It's great. And so I wrote on behalf, before the Secretary of Defense got there, I got to write into this book on behalf of the American people, literally, and whatever the inscription was from there. And then by the time the SecDef got on ground, his arm was broken. So maybe he took it off, but he just signed it. So it's my handwriting. So if you go to Turkey, apparently, and you go to this this big monument that they have in Turkey to their revered leader Ataturk. There's a book that you can pull up in the internet there. You can see the dignitary's inscription with his signature. And so if you see the SecDef's, that particular SecDef's, it's yours truly inscription on there.
That's super cool, man. That's
on behalf of the American people. So the Turkish guys, the guards, my counterparts, half of them thought it was awesome, and they're saluting me as like a joke and stuff and things like that. And the other were like, fuck you. How dare you, little peon, sign our book, and it was just kind of like, yeah. So it was really cool.
As if you broke his arm so you can write in this book, right? Like,
just the fact that, I wrote in it, and I wasn't
over them, right?
I wasn't of the stature to have my inscription in there, but yeah, it's pretty cool. So that was just one cool story. I guess I'm part of Turkish history, even if just myself and now the people that listen to this know it, and a few of my friends. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So that was a cool story. I got to sign to the country of Turkey on behalf of the American people. Yours truly got to write into this book that only big time dignitaries usually get to sign. So that was a cool story. That was one cool story that pops into my head.
Yeah, I love that story. I love that, that's what came to mind here. I'm thinking like there might be like an action situation or, something, some combat or whatever. But I think it's a cool moment. It seems like you appreciate, the level that you were serving and who you're with and like what that moment meant to you. I think that's really cool. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you wanted to share before we move on? I think this is the kind of stuff when you have someone on the show. My thing isn't like, hey, you just wrote a book, we're just going to ask you 5 questions about the book. I like to get to know the person. So it doesn't have to be from being a special agent, but is there anything else, a moment that came to you as I just said that you're like, if we're cracking a beer right now, what would you share with me?
Well, I'm a recovered alcoholic, so I don't drink anymore. But when I'm in these situations where I'm shooting the shit, to be honest, man, I've been so blessed to do, you saw my background. I've done so much cool shit in my life. A lot of the times I just shut up because I feel like if I start talking about the stuff that I've done, I'm either going to come across as braggadocious or people are going to think I'm full of shit. know, and so I really don't, I don't shout from the rooftops the things that I've done because I've been so blessed along the way. I was a soldier, and then I was a special agent, and then I was an entrepreneur, and now I'm an author as well. I mean, I've just been so blessed to do such cool things along the way. There's just so many as a Fed, sure, soldier, sure. I mean, you name it. I've been in a lot of cool situations.
So here's the thing: you don't want to talk about yourself, which is cool. We're gonna get to you. But first, why don't we do this? We'll pivot and we'll talk about your mom, because I know you dedicated your book to your mother.
Oh my God! You obviously. Italian, there you are, Italian.
I'm a paisan. I'm a mama's boy for sure. She's actually texted me about 6 times since we started recording.
I love it. Mine probably has too.
I forgot to tell her that we're recording. But obviously you have great admiration for your mother. You dedicated your book to her. She's meant a lot in your life. Can you share a little bit about that? How she set you up for success or a belief in yourself, something that really turned you into the man that you are today?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, Mike, from the bottom of my heart, thanks for asking me about her because I don't really get asked about her publicly. I don't know if I have, but to this extent. So my mom was raised in the projects of San Francisco. She grew up extremely impoverished, and met my father. They had me. They split up when I was at a young age. They didn't go through a nasty divorce or court battle or anything like that. She said, I'm going to take Jeremy. They agreed. However, it was going to work out financially. It was a very copacetic split. But what I remember is a woman who showered me with affection, who showered me with attention, who gave me everything that I needed and worked her ass off. She remembers it a little differently. And she would admit those things, I think. But my mom, she carries a lot of guilt, I think, unnecessarily, because we were pretty, and she'll kind of downplay it a bit. But, I remember a Christmas where for $20, she had $20 to her name at a Christmas. And I remember the Christmas and I don't know any different.
Yeah.
And so, and I was a kid and she made it just as wonderful, with $20 to her name as she could. So my mom, her upbringing and what she did, and when she had me, she worked 3 jobs, and at one point when I was a kid, I remember we lived on top of this bar that she worked at, and I think it was a studio apartment, and my mom, she remembers, her sleeping because she's in the middle of 3 jobs and I'm playing with the toys next to the bed. But, I think, I don't want to speak on behalf of her, but I think she probably regrets that a little bit, thinking that she wasn't giving me enough attention, or that she wasn't, but for me, what I saw was a very strong woman. I saw a very strong woman who did a hell of a job raising a son, who worked her ass off for me, and so what that did for me, as far as who I am today. Well, my mom, I have a pretty big personality. My mom has an even bigger personality, and you're right. We're talking about that Italian side there, know, and so she has an even bigger personality. And so what I think that imparted on me is I inherited some of her big personality, but it also showed me what a strong woman is, and I think, to be honest, that I've always, in terms of partners, I have always been attracted to women who are strong women, and I think what's peculiar about that, unfortunately so, is because I've talked to a lot of my friends who are women, especially when I was a Fed, and they would say, like, and, we all carried guns, obviously, and we had the gold badges, and these are, I had good looking friends, and I would say that to them, just as a friend.
Sure.
But, then I would, we'd be talking, we were single, and we'd be talking about what it's like out in the dating world. And these girls would say to me, Jeremy, guys are intimidated by me. And I'm like, why are guys intimidated by you? And she, well, because I carry a gun, I carry a handgun, I'm a Fed, and I'm like, well, that's a fucking turn on to me. I think that's gangster. I think it's,
plus I'm sure they're, they have that tough skin to be in that role. Right.
Yeah.
And just a confident personality and who they are and everything.
And I like it,
I agree. Yeah. Like someone who, the thing for me, it's not necessarily just the gun or like maybe the persona, but it's also the passion, like someone who is striving for their best in life, and whatever that might be. Maybe that is a stay-at-home mom, maybe that's an entrepreneur vision, but I just someone who like knows what they want and they're passionate about it and they go and get it. They take action on it. That to me is like the most attractive thing in the world. I do want to pause you for a second because you're talking about your mom, and she didn't realize this likely at the time. Maybe you said she feels guilty about different things. Maybe she wishes she could have taught you something. But the thing is, I've learned this as a parent now, is that our kids, it's not always what we teach them, because what it's taught, it's what's caught from our actions. So your mom's actions, you caught that, you understood. Now you reflect on it like, hey, that Christmas with $20 was just as magical as if she had 200 or 2,000, because she spent time with us, or, we knew she did the best she could. So that actually meant more than if she just had an abundance and she just split it evenly among siblings or whatever. She did what she can do. That was caught. You understood that. And I'm sure, like, obviously dedicating the book to her, it's the things that you caught from your mom's actions and personality that she didn't maybe sit down with you and say, all right, Jeremy, I'm going to teach you X, Y, and Z today, right? Am I right with that? Or maybe I'm off the mark in your situation.
What my mom imparted on me most, and what I think I appreciate, one of the things I appreciate the most about my mom is that she really taught me that I can do anything that I want to do in my life. And I think,
so she was intentional about that. She actually stopped you and said,
"Oh my God,
dude,
my mom
you could freaking do whatever you want."
Yes,
she said those
100%.
That's great,
100%. And and I think that's sort of, that's how I live my life. I live my life doing whatever the hell I wanted to do and whatever I was interested in and passionate about. And I did it I've done it without fear. I've done it with fear, but I've overcome it. And I attribute that to my mother. Most of that, some of that's innate, I'm sure, but my mom really told me, one of her favorite sayings, and I put it in the book, is, she'd say, the world is your oyster. I still don't know what the hell that means literally, but you can do whatever you want to do.
Right. Make it what you want. Yeah.
100%. And when it came to, leaving, when I left I was assistant special agent in charge. When I left the federal government, I had guys working for me across 5 states. I was in DC. I had guys across 5 states in the mid-Atlantic. I was a GS-14. I was rising fast. And, when I left the government to start my business, I caught a lot of shit for it. And rightfully so. A lot of us were former military guys that came up through modest backgrounds, and that's a good gig. It's a really good gig. I was back then, this is 15 years ago, I'm 30 years old, making 140 a year.
Yeah.
I'll retire at 50 with 30 years federal service, probably around 250, 260 a year. Is what I'll be making. And so, it's not entrepreneur if you're, on the uber successful side of things, but damn good money, right, and a very, very good career. And to be retired at 50, but it was my mom, who absolutely believed in me and who absolutely thought I should do it, and take that leap of faith. And I had friends who were, like I said, other agents. Some of them were inspired by what I did. And I literally had one of my best friends to this day. He bought the book. He reviewed the book. We talk all the time. And he literally, when I told him I was doing it, he's one of the guys I went to Kuwait with. He said, "You're a fucking idiot." Wow. And we laugh about it to this day. Yeah. And he'll say, we laugh about that frequently. He's still one of my best friends, but my mom really imparted on me that I could do anything that I wanted to do. And then that's really how I've lived my life.
Dude, that's awesome. So you had that belief and, it was your personal belief. You got to take some credit there that you went and you did the thing, but it definitely was supported by your mom, which is huge. That support system is so important. And that's why as a dad, I'm doing my damn best to do the same thing for Isabel, just to let her know whatever she wants, she can get it. I don't have all the answers, but I'll help you find them. And one thing we talk about is that we're problem solvers. If it's one life lesson I could teach her is we problem solve. Because when she says I can't, I stop her in her tracks. I say, let's change that verbiage, right? You might not be able to do it in this moment, but we're going to figure out how you can, right? We're going to at least give it our best, all right? If it's school and maybe she doesn't know how to solve a problem, it's not I can't. We got to learn the solution. So I definitely love what your mom did for you there. And I see it. I feel it in your persona, just in your energy, that there's that stability of confidence from your mom, which is awesome. But there had to be a light bulb moment that went off in your head where you're like, I actually want to pursue entrepreneurship. Where did that come from? Was there a family member, someone you were studying? Just where did that seed get planted?
So I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur from the time I was a kid.
Okay.
It was, and I haven't talked about this specifically with other entrepreneurs. I didn't know what that looked like though. And so fast forward to, I'm 19 years old. I got a few years of college under my belt. I broke up with my high school sweetheart. I started living at the end of my sophomore year like it was my freshman year up in Chico State, which was the #1 party school in the nation at the time. Mm-hmm. And so my brother was in the Army before me 10 years prior, and I knew what it did for him. And after I really screwed up that second semester of my sophomore year, I walked into the recruiter's office in Chico, California, and said, "Hey, my brother was a military policeman or MP. I want to be an MP. Sign me up." And the reason I did that, though, was because, and what I'm getting at is that, I just looked for opportunity to better myself. Because what I saw then at the time, and this is all, I'm going to tie this all together, but what I saw at the time, sort of the writing on the wall for me, was my buddies, they were still back in the same town. And this isn't all of them. This is a lot of them. My other pals who are very successful now and entrepreneurs. But, I think there was a strong likelihood I would have ended up back in the same town, drinking the same cheap beer, right, dating the same gals that I was dating in junior high and high school, and ended up,
1000%. And to, we're not trying to knock anybody here, but there is a truth about a group of friends, a group of people. Could be, they always say your 5 friends get that are most influential to you, right? And change who those 5 are. If you need to change your life, like look at those 5. But what happens is once someone in the group starts to rise up, right? And even if it's just pursuing it, not saying you're even successful yet, but you're like, I want something more, right? Than what we're hanging out and doing here. You're pursuing something more. that group's going to want to try to bring you back down, level you back down to them, because it's all there. It's maybe and they're not doing it maybe intentionally to hurt you or whatever, but they're kind of thinking, man, if Jeremy makes it, what's that going to say about me? We got to kind of keep him down here, right? And again, I'm sure your friends didn't even think about that. It's just a reaction that happens. And so you were kind of experiencing that. And so how did you eventually kind of just say, I'm going to break free and just do my thing?
Well, and I joined the Army, and I remember one of my best friends, he was one of those guys. He was not college material. He would have been the first to admit that. He got his apprenticeship as an electrician while we were still in high school, and we were like brothers. And I remember when I joined the military and I had sort of lost touch, he got really offended because he felt like that was it. Like I had branched out, and I thought that it wasn't that I was doing something better. I think he thought in his mind that I thought that I was better than the group, or I was better than where I had come from, and that I had forgotten those guys.
Right.
And so that's more what I dealt with. I've been blessed with that. All my friends always really wanted the best for me, but I think it was especially with him, and he was, he passed away at a very young age in his 20s, but I'm sure he'd be doing the same stuff now. He'd be in the same house he was in that he owned. He'd still be an electrician, and it's great stuff. That was his. I
just think sometimes people, from my experience, I was talking to a good friend of mine recently about a family member, and the conversation was about this person kind of always knocking down an idea, right? Or they're just trying to belittle a concept that is a big, audacious, goal or business or whatnot, and it's not like they're trying to do that on purpose, but they're dealing with something internally that's like a self-belief that they struggle with, and now they're just kind of reflecting it back on you. And that's what happens a lot with people.
Yeah, and I think you see that. I mean, that's a shitty part of humanity. Mm-hmm. I think is that people they have their own innate insecurities.
Yes.
And they pass those on to other people. And I think that's why you see that the most, like when people want to see people fail. Mm-hmm. They want there's the haters. And I believe that comes from insecurity.
1,000%. And I think that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a shitty reality,
But
and
honestly, the people that are listening right now, we want, the reason Jeremy and I are having this conversation is because if you haven't dealt with it, you're going to deal with it within your network, within your friend group, within your family. And you got to just simply push through it, because that person's dream isn't your dream. And you're not even trying to say I'm better than you or whatever. Who cares about class situations and all that? What we care about is that you have a God-given purpose, and whether you believe or not, you have a purpose to be on this planet, right? Maximize it to the highest potential, right? And I'm talking to myself right now because I know that I can continue to do that better than I am every day. That's why we strive to get better. That's why it's exciting when we wake up and we put our 2 feet on the ground. So you were doing this. You were leveling up. You went through the Army. You did the special agent. And then take us now, and I know we're jumping ahead, but take us to the success of JDub's brewery, right? And you have other notable blue collar businesses aside from the brewery, but what do you want to share with that? Because that's kind of how you leveled up.
And you remind me, because I have such bad ADD, but you remind me, and I'll pull it forward real quick. Your question. I kind of fell into the successes that I had as an MP. I was a military policeman. I got injured in a competition. I was on my way out of the Army. One of my leaders said, try going to be a CID agent, a uniformed CID, Criminal Investigations Division in the Army. I didn't even know they had uniformed, meaning enlisted or even officer uniformed special agents. I did. I took advantage of that opportunity. I got accepted. The Army let me stay in because I wasn't doing the hardcore soldiering that I was doing before. And so really it was, and then I did a decent job as a special agent in the Army. So I had a job lined up to go be a special agent as soon as I got out. A mentor of mine, I transferred. I was in Heidelberg, Germany, my last 3 years in the Army. I was the only enlisted guy in that office. I was working with senior officers and civilians.
Wow.
No one knew I was in the military except for the brigade commander.
Yeah.
And so, but I was fortunate because, that was peculiar too, because I was a staff sergeant, and I had these officers coming up and calling me by first name basis, and even sir. They had no, I mean, I got over it, but they had no idea I was a staff sergeant, But and then the next thing you know, I'm hired as a special agent in Laguna Niguel, California, as a civilian before I even got out. So I was still I was on terminal leave, which means I was still in the Army, but I was taking sort of like my PTO type thing. And so I was on leave on my way out, but I was already working a civilian job. So I was getting paid as a staff sergeant as well as a GS, I think 11 at the time. So I was getting a federal, civilian paycheck as well as my Army paycheck for like 3 or 4 months at the very end there. But it was all because I just took advantage of the opportunities that I had. And before I know it, I'm a fucking assistant special agent in charge working out of DC.
Right.
And I got guys working across me in 5 states. So I always wanted to be, I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in Northern California, as you know. I grew, that's the Sierra Nevada, is actually out of Chico, California. I grew up with craft beer. Craft beer isn't sexy like it was 10 years ago or even 7 years ago. But, I grew up, as a kid experimenting with alcohol, drinking just as much what we would call craft beer as I did the Bud Lights and, the global stuff and the domestic stuff. So for me, I grew up with craft beer. And then when I was in Olympia, Washington, I was stationed there right when I became an agent. I started getting into home brewing, making beer. And I was buying ingredients out of the back of guys' houses and shit. It was really cool.
Yeah.
And I got into it. And I really fell in love with the art of beer making and beer itself and the different styles and the history behind beer. And so I was a home brewer, and I was a pretty good home brewer. And so you fast forward, I'm in DC. I met my ex-wife and her parents were down here in Sarasota where I'm at now. And so her father, suggested to me, he said, you ought to be, and he knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I had been kicking around. I thought about like opening something up there in DC. And he knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I actually taught him how to home brew. I bought him a book and, homebrewed with him. But, he said, you ought to think about opening your brewery. And I'd been sort of thinking about, becoming a brewery owner. He said, you ought to think about doing it down here in Florida. And I said, I'll think about it. And so I went back to DC and I started doing the market research. I didn't even know if I knew that term at the time, but I started doing the market research.
Yeah.
And there was like almost no breweries. I mean, there was nothing in Sarasota County. There was nothing in Manatee County at the time. And in fact, a couple of us actually ended up opening about the same time.
There was a spike of like, that tipping point where now it became a thing. And then every other corner has one now. But
yeah. And so, but when I was doing the market research, there was going to be like 500,000 people with no brewery. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, supply and demand was just screaming at me. Like, this is the place. And I'd been coming down here for vacation, and I thought, I did the market research.
Sarasota's a beautiful spot. That's where you're at now, right?
Yeah, I'm in Sarasota. Been in Sarasota for
that's where you're talking about, right? Am I understanding this?
Yeah. So sorry about that. Yeah. We were coming down from DC. My ex-wife and I met outside of DC. She grew up there. Her parents had moved down here. We would come down to visit. He said, you ought to think about opening it down here. I did the market research and said, holy shit. Like, if I'm going to do this, this is the place to do it. And so fast forward to 2012. It was the middle of December. I want to say December 14th, December 15th. I resigned. I went into my bosses and said, I'm quitting. And I had a top secret clearance, right? Like, I had the highest clearance that you could get. And to get that alone is worth a shit ton of money. And because it's the checks and balances you have to get through to get that clearance, right? And what it costs an agency.
A lot of time and energy.
Oh my God, that's worth its weight in gold.
I got to ask you this. So when you leave a position like that has high clearance, I've worked in corporate America where I was a store manager, and if an employee leaves, whether it's disgruntled or they're leaving on good terms, they have to hand in their key. Typically the whole store gets all brand new keys, right? So like, that's just a retail store that did a couple $1 million in annual revenue. You're talking about high clearance within the government. When someone walks away from that, are you like monitored for a period of time from them, or what does that look like? If you mind sharing?
Not in
because you had intel and stuff, right? So
yeah, but it was more criminal based than it was like espionage or terrorism or counterterrorism. That type of investigation. So
the worst thing you might do is leak a white collar story or something.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't talk about it. We couldn't. You couldn't talk about
sign something that you couldn't talk about it anyway, right?
Yeah, well, right, exactly. And so and as a side note, when I left, and my friends were still my friends. The agents were still my agents, and I was, and I had shined a little brighter than a lot did. And I'm not just talking about my friends, but as an agent, I kind of led the way in terms of promotion and all that stuff. So
they had to be shocked when you came in and said, I'm walking away. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Their jaw was on the ground.
Some were shocked. Other people that knew me got it. Mm-hmm. Like I said, one called me an idiot. Another guy, my boss, who I actually told I was going to resign, said he was inspired by me. He said he would like to be an entrepreneur too, but he also didn't know what he wanted to do. But I mean, in terms of, I had to turn all my stuff in. I had to, again, my gun, I had carried my personal gun for over 10 years. When you're an agent, your gun goes with you, wherever you go. So like if I go from Washington to Germany or I get transferred to Texas, my gun goes with me. So I turned in my gun. But, what I missed the most out of that was not being in the circles, not being in the know. Even though I didn't want to, I missed being able to talk to my friends about what they were doing, because that was just sort of what you did. You talk about your investigations, you talk about that stuff. And now I don't have the clearance. Yeah. And I'm still, part of the team, but I'm not privy to, and I'm not even allowed to know what's going on anymore. So, and my friends never looked at me differently, but that I felt different. I felt, I kind of. So you were able
to keep the camaraderie side as long as it wasn't quote unquote business related on their side of it.
Yeah, and I miss carrying my badge. I carried a badge for 13 years. So not having your badge and credentials. So that was with me everywhere.
A part of you definitely was left behind there when you left, but a new part of you was born. So it's kind of like shedding, your skin a little bit.
Oh, 100%. And believe it or not, I mean, you're getting a little bit of it now, but I have a pretty big personality. Well, when I was in the government, depending on where I was, if I didn't feel comfortable in the circles that I was with, I would just be quiet. I was known in some parts of agencies as a quiet guy, and it was self-protectionism. Yeah. But so the reason why JDubs came to be, it was a rugby nickname of mine. Okay. And that was a drunken
two
story.
J's, right? JJ.
I didn't give myself my nickname. You can never give yourself a nickname. That's gonna it's gonna go. It's gonna.
One of my employees when I worked at that retail store, I was telling you about his name. I created a lot of nicknames, and it was R2 because he was RR, so I did R2. Yeah. But JDubs makes sense too.
Yeah, I know, and it was a drunken rugby story, in the middle of the night in Olympia, Washington, and so the reason why I chose that name was because when I talk about shedding skin, when I and I never really felt, I don't want to say I felt like an imposter, but I never felt like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing as an agent, even in law enforcement. I mean, I never really felt like that was my calling or that's what I was supposed to be doing. Gotcha. So I kind of felt, I don't want to say like a fish out of water. I think that would be dramatic, but I never felt like I was supposed to be doing what I was doing. Yet ironically, I was very fucking good at it.
Yes. Dude, I had the same experience, not to turn this back to me, but like when I did really well in sales, I worked in insurance and I worked at, Sleep Number as a store manager there and a sales rep. I was always great, like, winning awards and stuff and all this great stuff. I felt good among my peers, but in my heart, I was like, I'm not in the right arena here. Like I'm just doing well because I want to do well. I loved helping people, number one. So like that part of it connected with a purpose. But I always knew there was something different. That's why I got into entrepreneurship back in 2017. But so you felt that same thing, huh? Like I'm kicking ass. I'm an MVP here. Like if we're talking, I'm a big sports guy, if you couldn't tell. Like you're the MVP of the season. and you still don't feel right. It's kind of like Andrew Luck walked away a couple of years ago, but his was injury related. But you just walk away because you're like, my purpose is somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I never felt like I was doing with my life what I was supposed to be doing. You know, and another side note to that is, and I know this is a very hot topic right now, you know, and I am not political in my personal life, but the waste in the government is worse than anything that you can see on any of those news channels. I don't care what it is. I saw it. I lived it. It was fucking disgusting.
You're talking about just the spend and lack of
oversight, lack of
apathy, sloppy, like just freaking
our empathy. Yeah, no, not even sloppy. It was, I mean, just the most entitled, lazy group of fucking people you can imagine. I don't care who hears that. That's the generality. There's an exception. Mm-hmm. The exception are the hard workers and the hard chargers, and there are agencies like ATF and the law enforcement world and even in the Bureau, the FBI. You know, so there are agencies that are stellar, you know, and there are vocations, especially like when it comes to lawyers. I found most lawyers are working pretty hard and doing as they would on the public side of things or the private sector. But generally speaking, the government is the most wasteful, fucking entitled, apathetic group of people and organizations you can imagine. And this has nothing to do with what's going on with right now. Yeah. It's disgusting. And so why I bring that up is not to bitch or talk shit about the government. It's because I didn't feel good about taking taxpayers' money to get what I did. I mean, I really didn't. And I didn't want to be part of something. And again, there are agents who are working their ass off.
There's the good side of it, but you saw the bad side of it that you felt associated with and the scumbag side of it where you're like, how can I be part of this team? Right?
And I got to DC, man, and it was just, it was sickening to me. Yeah. You know, and it's like, I'm not a glutton for punishment, but if I'm going to get a good salary, shit, dude, I was 30 years old. I'm a blue collar guy, 140 grand a year at 30 when you grew up like I did. That's good. That's good money.
You definitely made it at that point. Yeah.
Oh, I made it big time, you know, but I could not look myself in the mirror, and I didn't want to be part of something that I felt was correlated with entitlement and laziness and apathy. I did not want that to be my work experience, my professional experience. I got one life, and I didn't want it to be doing that.
Like just what's the word I'm looking for? An unbalance of the qualities like that you cared about being the things that you were in alignment with weren't in alignment with, and so it just didn't feel good. It felt you couldn't rest your head on the pillow feeling good at night, right? So
no,
I definitely know that feeling. Just working, I've never had anything like a government position, but working for different organizations where the people at the top make decisions and you don't agree with them, and then like you're putting your hard work and energy into it and supporting that in a way, because if you do well, they do well, and you're supporting people you don't believe in. So that's a tough thing.
Yeah, and they're entitled and lazy themselves. Yeah, and it's like and I saw it many times, and when we all do. This wasn't just me, but as part of the good thing I like about being an entrepreneur is making my own money and making my own way. Because one thing that always I couldn't sleep well at night, knowing that I was working and taking orders from people who I'd run fucking circles around. Exactly. If it wasn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I remember like when I was in the Army and some of these, these NCOs, and they were great NCOs. I was blessed. But then there were other shitbags, and these guys, because I was a corporal or I was a sergeant and these guys outranked me, or I was lower enlisted, I was a private, and I've always been a pretty intelligent guy, and I'd be, knew what I was capable of, and these guys would be telling me what to do or chewing my ass. And
it was time to graduate. It was time to graduate out of that.
And I'd be thinking to myself, and this was always a pet peeve of mine, like, dude, enjoy it, because this is the only fucking time in life that a guy like you is going to be in charge of a guy like me, is in a place like the government. So,
That's true. And corporate America, for sure. Here's what I want to get back to, though. Some of the things you just like flew right past. So in Sarasota, huge opportunity for breweries. You start JDub's brewery. I mentioned it in the intro. One of the fastest. I think at the time you launched it, it was the fastest growing brewery.
We became the fastest. Yeah, we became the fastest.
So obviously, like, share some of that success. What was that like, and how was it going? And like, we want to hear about that.
God damn! How do you want me to slice that?
You got to talk a little bit about yourself. I know.
No. I don't. You know what I mean?
Don't talk about you. Talk about JDub's brewery. Give us the insight. We're flying the wall. It launches. It's cranking. Like, what was that like?
What was that like to be on? It was fucking awesome.
Like you did the ribbon cutting and that whole thing.
Yeah. So I'll talk about it, and I'm going to talk about it from this is going to start veering towards the side of business as it should, and marketing and branding, and so JDubs, right? And I will say this: I am just kind of wired to be good at branding, more so than marketing, but I'm also good at marketing. So the reason why I say that, and a lot of it was learned. I can't even tell you how many fucking books on business and marketing and branding that I devoured. Yeah, and I've got thousands of them probably, and I've probably read maybe that many. And my work ethic is pretty incredible whenever it is I'm going to throw myself into something. So
let me ask you this, Jeremy, if you were in 10th grade and your English teacher told you to read a book, how many books would you have read then?
One.
Right. Because they said read a book. In business, for yourself, nobody's requiring you to read a book. You read 1,000, right? Here's the difference. Passion, inspiration, purpose. And you just devoured it, which is awesome.
Well, and I appreciate that, and so to JDubs. So what I was, and I read, again, like I said, I studied entrepreneurs and I studied marketing and I studied branding. But what I did with JDubs, and what I think what was special about JDubs, is that it had a very distinct look and feel about it, and the things that it stood for were apparent. And what I mean by that is like, okay, and I talked a lot about this, and I talk about it in business shit, and I talk about it in branding, marketing in general. When it comes to your brand, there are things, and I'm very adamant that the owners need to come up with the brand. The owners need, because whoever's creation that business is, there are the people that need to create the brand and the feeling behind the brand. And it doesn't need to be sexy. It doesn't need to be cool. It needs to be authentic. And as long as it's authentic, we can work with the cool stuff. We can work with the other stuff. But as long as it's authentic, you can never get called out. If you're something you're not, it's a fucking recipe for disaster so many different ways. That's true. And so what I'm talking about is with JDubs is that JDub was part of my personality. I mean, I am JDub, right? But the JDub's brewery look and feel was so distinctive. And the reason why it was so distinctive and stayed distinctive was because it came from me. And so because it came from me, I knew what fit in the JDub's brand and what did not. And I was militant about it. And I really was. And I still am when it comes to branding, maybe not as much as I was, because craft beer is kind of its own unique monster in that it's very individualistic. But
can you give us some examples of how it was like an extension of your personality? Like, how would you describe that?
Yeah. So JDubs was sort of this. I grew up with Sublime. The band Sublime. Okay, I'm from Northern California. I grew up listening to that shit. The college kids are still listening to it, but I was listening to it when it was coming out in college, in high school. And I remember, when the lead singer died, but I think it was Bradley. But, so.
I was a pretty, I don't want to say big fan, like I had every album, but I was a fan of them for sure.
Yeah, it's a great brand, but it had this look and feel to it that, I would say these sort of
like
things.
The Sublime-y kind of feel, like
Sublime, ska.
Some of that animation.
Ska, Sublime. Beachy without being over the top or cliche, colorful, kind of like that Southern California skateboarder, sort of vibe.
That. Okay.
Right. And it was the happy-go-lucky, very positive, cheeky.
It had that vibe of like, you only live once, life is short, have freaking fun. Remember that when you're with your friends to enjoy it. Like that.
But it was
vibe.
Right. And it was also quality, and I put my money where I dumped tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars down fucking drains that the public never tasted, because quality for me and anything that I do, if it's got my name on it, are associated with, it's not, I took beer back. I pulled beer out of market, and I had to buy that shit back at retail prices.
What would be some of the reasons that a batch went wrong? I have no idea about brewer. I've never home brewed. I'm not really that big of a beer guy. I'll share a quick anecdote about that. But anyway, what would go wrong? How could something?
So, you could have a temperature. Something could go wrong with temperature in your brew. Temperature is so important. I'm talking about a couple degrees can completely change the flavor profile and the characteristics of a beer. So heat, sanitation. Sanitation was never a problem with us, but one problem that we had once, for example, was on the canning line. The cans come as big cans and the lids go on top. So it goes through, can of beer without a top, goes through the little conveyor belt, little thing goes down, fills it up with beer, and then lid goes on top, seals it, right? If that seal is compromised at all, you can't see it. You can barely see it with a microscope, but if there is the slightest penetration of that seal and it's not properly sealed, your beer can get oxidized.
Yep, a little bit of air gets in there, it's oxidized,
and that's it. And that's no one's fault. Sometimes this shit just happens. And so that happened once
properly. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were the QA person, right? The quality assurance person from day one. But then as you grew, I'm sure you had to have a team for that, right? You couldn't be there checking every batch, right?
No. But it all starts it all starts and ends at the top. And I had conversations with my head brewer at the time when it came to certain batches of beer that were put out or that were, either whether in distribution or even in our tap room. If there was any question at all about the quality, I would buy the beer back. I would dump it down the drains if it hadn't made it to the public, or I would buy it back. And I would, it didn't matter the cost to me, because if it's got my name on it, it's going to be high quality.
One person that's their first experience, now they're never coming back or telling their friends that your beer tastes like, pardon my French, but skunk piss or something, or whatever.
You're right. And so I think that was the quality aspect. But when it came to the branding, the look and the feel of JDubs, it was very distinctive. And the reason why it was distinctive was because it came from me and I knew what belonged in it and what didn't. And so that was the kind of music that we listened to. Right. And so if you remember the band Less Than Jake, they were a pop ska band. One of the co-founders, Vinny Fiorelli, he's in the book. We've contemplated starting many businesses together. He's a creative.
You're making me want to start a band again, man.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So no, but but I knew what belonged in there. That kind of music, Less Than Jake, Sublime.
Did you have open mic nights and stuff, or
we had open mic nights?
Live music.
We had live music, and that was more community involvement. So that's another thing. I was big on the local community and supporting the local community. And so, and I think that was paramount to JDubs. And I'll be real, the things that we did on a local level was imitated a lot. And we were doing things authentically.
You're doing well, so now they're like, what are they doing? We got to replicate it. But that wasn't really authentic to them. Because JDubs wasn't running that place.
No, and that's it. Right. And again, in craft where things are so individualistic, you want everything to be your own, and you want it to be authentic and coming from a real place. And when I would see other brewers, and it wasn't a lot more often. I mean, God, craft was such a fun industry to be in. I would see guys in fucking kilts with, a black lipstick on in boardrooms with white collar execs. And it was just the weirdest, most cool, kooky industry one could be in.
Yeah.
But
what were they doing? They were pitching your products and stuff, or different craft beer.
Well, these were these were other brewers. But yeah, I mean, one of the owners of a well-known craft brewery you may have heard of, which I won't disclose. But the guy walks around with no fucking shoes on. Right. I mean, this is just
Talk about authentic. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know another guy who's kind of a dick, and he built his whole persona of his brewery around kind of being a dick, and it works, you know what I mean? And it's but it was really cool. But I think, the fly on the wall in JDubs was we created something for the community. Mm-hmm. We created something that was very authentic, and intentional. And I think that it just felt special. We really, I built that brewery for the community to be a beacon of Sarasota. And I really feel like we hit the mark, at least in part, with that. And so I just think that was, we gave the locals, in terms of craft beer in our little slice of the universe, we gave them something to be proud about.
That's awesome.
And so it was just a real cool look and feel. And so I think it was just, and then the way we took off, and I'll kind of segue into that a little bit, being the fastest growing. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of things that went into that, but I'm not going to sit here and, again, and this might surprise you, but I'm not going to discredit, I was the driving force behind that. And you may have seen this about me. I am all about fulfilling my potential and taking things as far as I think that they can go, if the ability is there. I saw what JDubs was capable of. And so I pushed and pushed and pushed to the point now, and I talk about this in Business Shit, the book, I got too far ahead of my skis. Okay. And I abandoned my conservative growth projections. Mm-hmm. And instead I started making my decisions based off of growth that I had been experiencing. And I'm talking triple digits. Yeah. We were growing triple digits year over year, and that ended up fucking me. Okay. And that's a case in point, and that's something that I talk to entrepreneurs now. And I think, when I talk about in the book is not getting too far ahead of your skis. Yeah. And it's a cautionary
I'm glad you're talking
tale.
about that, because that is actually something in over 200 plus episodes that I haven't talked a ton about, is someone almost grown too fast for them to be able to.
And we did. And
either handle it, or it just, the wrong decisions are made because of the exponential growth. Yeah.
All the above. And it was ego. That's why when you talked about it first, what was it like to experience that?
Yeah.
Dude, I was so fucking successful with my first endeavor. I was on the cover of magazines. I was on the news so much that I didn't even know when I was. People were telling me, "Hey man, I saw you on this." I'm like, "Oh no shit, really? Oh, okay, cool." And
that's awesome.
But and looking back, I became egotistical, and I didn't even know it. I was set up for failure, and I talk about this. I don't talk about this in Business Shit, but I have another project I'm working on now. I'm writing about failure. And I will say a little spoiler. My next book is going to be about failure and lessons in failure. And up until that point in my life, I had never failed anything on a substantial level. Mm-hmm. Anything I had gone into, I had excelled in and fucking hit a home run in everything I had done. And the reason why I say that so emphatically is not to make you think how wonderful I am.
No, it set you up for this fall.
Holy shit, dude.
Yeah. When you got hit with your first failure, it wasn't a jab. It was a freaking knockout punch. Yeah.
God damn. You think about it. I was,
you didn't know what to see. You didn't see it coming because you didn't know what it looked like.
Go back to high school. I'm the fucking captain of the best football team ever at a Northern California powerhouse. We win the fucking Northern California State Championship at the Oakland Coliseum. I'm the defensive captain. I get out of there, and I'm just saying what this is my experience. Happened. I go into the Army. I become one of the quote unquote best non-commissioned officers in the entire history of the Army. Now, I want to say something, and that's on paper. There are plenty of non-commissioned officers that were better than me. Sure. But I'm a Sergeant Audie Murphy, Sergeant Morales member, which means I am inducted into one of the top 1% club of the Army and non-commissioned officers. So I did that, right? And I was the NCO of the year for the battalion, the company, the brigade. I was the runner-up for the fucking the non-commissioned officer of all of Europe. I win that one. I'm going to be the non-commissioned officer of the entire U.S. Army. I was just one level below that. And you're talking about tens of thousands of guys that I was outperforming. So I did that in the Army. And then I hope to hell I'm not sounding braggadocious. I'm passionate about this because this is what I was the failure that I was set up for.
You're building what I call the world of scene. Now we know where Jeremy was in that moment and why you felt like you did, because that was your backstory.
And so that's the soldier. And then I go into the feds, and in 3 fucking years, I'm a boss in DC. I got guys working for me out of 5 states.
Yeah.
I'm shooting above the rest.
Right.
And then I go to the fucking brewery side. And,
I'm not
sitting here
super right, but
I'm on the fucking cover of
it
HGTV
makes
doing a
sense.
show about me.
It makes sense why you had that confidence and then got left hooked by the first time you experienced failure. So that's my question, because I don't know the full story about JDub. So is JDub still around?
I believe it is. It's in Orlando now. I sold my shares.
Okay, so you sold it. Okay.
It was a Chapter 11 reorganization.
Okay.
And so we talk about, right? So that buildup that I just told you about, when JDubs failed, it was on the cover of the fucking Sarasota Herald Tribune.
Yeah.
During COVID, mind you. So I'm sitting during a divorce that's highly contentious.
Oh man!
So here I go. I'm going.
Was COVID a big reason for it? Because you obviously had to do like no foot traffic for a while and stuff, and people just had.
Well, yeah. I mean, we were down 75%.
Were you kind of nosediving before COVID, or was okay?
No, just the opposite. Okay. You know, as a lot of people don't understand this about business, is that you can be growing and still not be profitable.
Yeah.
And we were, again, because my
because your expenses outweigh the profit, right?
My inexperiencedness, and I probably fucked that word up, but what just that did,
experience, I think.
Yeah, you're right. My inexperience, right? There you go. Yeah, I'll butcher words all day long. Thank God for spell check, or this whole fucking book would be just incoherent. But so we were just getting profitable.
Yeah.
When COVID hit, we were just becoming profitable, and we had been growing. But I had been spending all of my money on growth. I was not, and again, it was a stupid fucking decision. Mm-hmm. And it's something, and again, there's a fine balance there. There's an art there, as you know. Business can become much more art than science. But I was spending all of my resources, all of my capital was going back into growth, basing basing our not success, but I was rolling the dice, and I didn't know any better. Yeah. I thought because I had been so used to winning and excelling, and I just thought that was fucking life.
Right.
I thought we'd be growing at triple digits until the day I died, and I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And so we were just becoming profitable. COVID hits, and I don't know if I shared this. Did I share this before we started? But my tap room is my bar. Mm-hmm. That's our most profitable. So I have 3 revenue sources as a brewery. Okay. So your first revenue source is your tap room.
Okay.
And now your tap room is your biggest margins, right? Because I'm producing next door or even in that area, and I'm pouring the beer right off the tap.
Right. So there's no middleman distribution because it's happening
your
right
margins
there.
are amazing,
yeah,
right? Margins are amazing. You're around 70-75% margins.
Okay.
In your tap room, right? So that's shut down now. Okay. So, and now it's not my highest revenue generator because I was distributing on a state and even multi-state level.
So you said you sold your shares, but not for that part of the business, or how, or is it?
Well, no. I'll get to that. So so that's shut down. Okay. Tap room shut down. So there goes our highest margins. Sure. Second highest is kegs draft that we send out to the bars and restaurants. Well, guess what? Bars and restaurants are now closed.
Right.
Okay. So there's two out of my 3 about perfect, right? Yeah. 2 of my 3 revenue streams. Right. I got this one left. Right.
Yeah.
That was what's going on to me. Right.
Yeah.
So the last one is cans and distribution. And as I was telling you earlier, people were drinking more in COVID. Mm-hmm. So you would think, okay, great. Well, you had that to fall back on. The problem is that, okay, my beer distributors were also distributing Budweiser. They were also distributing Miller. They were also distributing Coors. They were also all of the other huge brands that you can think of. they were on the same trucks as JDubs and other craft breweries. So I was getting letters from my distributors. I had 13 distributors at that time across Florida and Georgia. I managed 13 beer distributors. And so we were actually getting letters saying, hey, sorry, craft brewers, but people are drinking so much of the domestic beer, you know, and some of the imports, we can't even fit your beer on the fucking trucks.
Was it also a pricing thing? Because during COVID, people were being tighter to be smarter. And I'm sure that... No. Because usually craft is going to cost a little more, right? It's the localization of it and all that.
It does, specialty. But man, I'll tell you, it does. But I'll tell you something. We were so far down in the pricing of a 6-pack, whether it was $9.99 or $10.99 or $11.49, didn't matter because we weren't even selling as many cans as we were before, and that's our least profitable.
Right.
Our least profitable.
So you're hanging on by a thread with your least profitable.
Oh
item.
My God! And so it was, you know, so it was just a fucking it was a bloodbath. You know, it was an absolute bloodbath. And so we filed Chapter 11. At least I had a great CFO. My CFO was more on the strategy side of the Chapter 11 at first, believe it or not. You know, we saw the writing on the wall, and he said, you know, that this COVID thing could be going on a little while. And he said, you know, we ought to think about filing Chapter 11.
Yeah.
And as a protection, you know, out of protection. Well, obviously, it lasted 7.5 months in Florida. 7.5 months. So and I'll say this, and I can talk about this now. So and this is a hell of a cautionary tale too. In our bankruptcy, I fired one of my beer distributors. And the way the laws are set up, the distributors have all the power. And the National Beer Wholesaler Association is one of the most well-funded lobbyist groups in America. Now, the distributors have all the power. That's true. I can't fire a distributor in Florida. When I distribute my beer, I cannot distribute it on my own. I have to use a distributor. And the way the laws are set up here, once I use a distributor, it's essentially a blood contract. You cannot, a brewer cannot really afford practically to get out of these fucking contracts with a beer distributor. So the beer distributors have all the power, and I'll say that to any of them, and the money. And so, in our Chapter 11, I fired one of my beer distributors, and they were a very powerful beer distributor. And in the good state of Florida, that doesn't happen. Breweries do not fire beer distributors. And so what I did is that I said, okay, I couldn't fire them out of that law, but in bankruptcy, you can terminate any contract you had.
Sure.
And so, and I had some sort of, me and this distributor had we had been on the outs for a while. I didn't think they were taking my brand as far as it could go. I was pushing them. They were basically saying, hey, little craft brewer, shut your fucking mouth, you know, go away. Be happy you're with us and you're as big as you are. And, you know, if you can't tell by me, if you push me, I push back.
Right.
You know, and I got
Twice
a whole lot
hard,
of fuck you and me. And so this was it. And these people had billions of dollars, you know? And so when I fired this, so what I did was in Chapter 11, I used my Chapter 11 right as a business owner to terminate that contract. Well, what they did, and this is something, and I hope that no entrepreneur deals with this, but I want people to understand.
You're sharing it so someone doesn't have to get the same lump that you got.
And because, and I'll get to that lesson. Well, there's a couple lessons there. I picked a fight I shouldn't have picked. You know, I picked a fight I'm the kind of guy, if I am laying in a pool of fucking blood and I have any ounce of life left in me, I'm going to spit a big fat bloody loogie on my foe before I die.
Yeah.
But that comes at a cost because I will fight, or hopefully I've learned my lesson. I haven't been in that situation again, but I would fight when I shouldn't have fought and fight back. I've never been an instigator. I've never been an asshole. I've never been a bully, but I've never been one to get pushed around. So when
sounds like what you're saying is you picked a fight that you couldn't win.
Exactly. And so what I did,
telling you that you couldn't win a fight was not a thing that anybody could do because you were going to fight no matter what.
I like fighting.
But your lesson learned there was don't pick a fight that you know you can't win, which is there's this weird thing going on social media right now about one man or who would win one gorilla versus 100 men or whatever, and it's kind of this controversy. But like that's a thing that you don't fight a gorilla one-on-one for sure. There's no question. You're getting it's a fight you can't win. So
yeah, and so what they did was they said, okay, got it. We can't fight it's a federal right. We can't fight that. But what we can do is we can put in a damages claim as to when you left our business, and they attached it to the bankruptcy. So the damages claim it was the way things really work. I'm going to tell you the way things really work, and this is real. When a beer distributor gets rid of one beer, unless it's just a crown jewel, they will just slide another beer into that one's place that's very similar. They don't lose money. 2
seconds later, problem solved on their end.
Oh, 100. They'll never admit that, but that's the reality of things. So what these guys did was they put in a damages claim, a very, very pricey damages claim. And so that turned into me going through a fucking character assassination. And essentially I was kind of pushed out of my own company.
Yeah.
And that was that, these guys, they hired a law firm.
It was like, where he's going to have to make this go away. And you had to kind
and
of
so
make
what they did,
away.
and the cautionary tale I want to tell people is that one of the age-old plays in the playbook for very rich corporations and even people is that they will bleed you dry through the courts. They will take you to court and they will bleed you financially dry until they will bankrupt your ass.
Because the thing they have that you didn't have was kind of like the government, that access money that could just steamroll you with it.
And they did. And I sat there in court and I got my ass kicked by a law firm and a guy who just made me look and sound like the biggest piece of crap. And I had to sit there on my hands and take it. And so what I will say that some of the biggest lessons, one, don't pick off. Not all fights are worth fighting.
Yeah.
And I am a guy that, like I said, I told you, I like to fight. I don't get pushed around, but I pray that if I'm in a situation like that again, I hope I'm not. But if I am, I will sit on my hands and I will take the punishment.
Yeah.
Rather than go into a war that I cannot win.
Right.
And so that's one. You don't fight every fight. You got to know what fights to pick and what fights to walk away from. And sometimes you got to sit there on your hands and take the beating. And that's what I should have done.
In this situation, what I'm hearing from you is not only did you have to take that beating, but now you're not playing offense. You're stuck in a courtroom. You're not like, just get on with the next thing. If you're going to lose, get back up off the mat. Like we're talking about wrestling, but like if you literally get your butt kicked, okay, you lost that round. Now you dust yourself up and go and do something else, opposed to I'm going to stand back up and get my butt kicked again by the same person over and over and over and over again. It's like, no, just eventually move on and go back and play offense again somewhere. Right.
Yeah. And so, and even better, remember I told you I was going through a divorce at the same time.
Yeah. So there's that whole dynamic.
Dude, I had back-to-back days. I would be in fucking courts, and these were Zoom sessions because it's COVID. So I'm sitting there in my fucking blazer in my living room, and I'm looking at the computer screen. Ugh. And in court, you don't speak unless you're told to speak.
Right.
And I am just getting my name dragged through the mud day in and day out from one court after the next. Right. And I can't even describe.
You're the bad guy in both of those situations. Dude, the fact that you're here and standing tall and strong right now, you got the book out, and I know you got other success stories that have come since what you're telling us right here, is really incredible, because the average man would crumble. And it's okay, like I said, to get knocked down. You feel it. It's human to feel it, but you got back up, and you're telling your story right now to do that. So I just want to say I definitely commend you for being. I went through divorce myself. I don't know how bad yours was and all that stuff. We don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but like having those two things going on together is enough to really break someone. And I know right now you're here to talk about it. So most important thing is you didn't give up. And I think that's awesome.
And well, I'll tell you this to give you insight. My divorce took 2.5 years.
Yeah, that's really rough.
So, and again, and me and my ex do a great job co-parenting, and a lot of those wounds either have healed or are healing. And I'm not going to sit here and badmouth anyone. Yeah. But it was a bad divorce, and it was, God, it was horrible. But you're right. And then outside of that too, I went personally bankrupt paying for these other court cases. And I got to tell you something, in bankruptcy, and this is one of the worst feelings that I had. I mean, all of it. We can talk for fucking 6 hours about how shitty all this was and the nuances and the layers of it. But when you're sitting in a courtroom and you're losing all of your assets, everything you've ever worked for, and people are talking about you like you're not there, and they're in like vultures taking your assets and talking about divvying it up. And this is shit that your blood, sweat, and tears. Right. And that is such a horrible feeling. What a horrible feeling that was.
Dude, I can't even imagine it, man. I can't.
And another thing that I talk about in business shit is, I like to impart. I feel like it's important to impart on young entrepreneurs, young business owners, and maybe even guys who middle tier who've been doing it a couple of years. You are not your brand,
right?
And so because the reason why I say that is because I was fucking JDub. This is JDub. I mean, I got the JDub's tattoo. Mm-hmm. I was JDub's, I got
way
that
back
tattoo
in rugby time though. So it's not just a brewery.
So I was JDub. JDub's failed. I was a failure. And so for me, it wasn't my business that was failing. It was me failing. Mm-hmm. And I failed. And then now you talk about the haters.
Here they come out of the woodwork.
Oh,
ready
God,
ready to pounce.
Where I was.
Yeah.
Oh, and you see this attitude, you see this personality in me. And so I'd be the guy on there to tell the haters and publicly, go fuck yourself, you little fucking troll, get out of here, and I would probably give them too much attention. But I knew, just knowing that these people, these little weasels that never had the fortitude or the guts or the courage to go out there and did what I did or what entrepreneurs do, and who sit back and talk shit, I knew they felt like they were vindicated and they won. And for me, that was one of the worst feelings in the world. And I imagined these haters as little fucking trolls in a cave, dancing around their little fucking fire, with their little guts and their little asses. And they got their little goblets and they're, cheers, death to the king, and it's like, and I just envision these little fucking trolls doing that.
Yeah.
And they know who they are. And, and it's like that. But that was another hard one, was feeling like the haters had won. Mm-hmm. That fucking sucked. So, yeah, it was.
Let's talk about that, because there's people who are tuning in who haven't gone through that, and they may. And there's also people who want to avoid going through that, and also just want to understand how you did get through that. So let me ask you, man, brother to brother here, like the divorce, the haters are celebrating, whether they're actually doing that or not. In your head, your confidence was shot with this picture of them dancing and all the whole thing. How did you eventually get through that?
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. I drank heavily. And that's not something I'm proud of. That was a crutch of mine. So that was also part of my downfall in the moment. The only thing I'm proud of, and you're a dad and I'm a dad. The only thing that I'm proud of is that I showed up for my kids. Mm-hmm. I could during that time, and I won't lie about this. Mm-hmm. I was fucking suicidal. I mean, I don't mind saying it, because it's part of my story.
You gotta say it. You gotta tell the authentic story of what's going on. Yeah,
I had the plan. I knew how I was going to do it. I knew the equipment I was going to use.
Wow.
And it wasn't even emotional anymore. It was fucking pragmatic. I was saying, okay, I just shouldn't. I am such a fucking failure. I am worth no good. The world doesn't need me. And it's like, okay, I would rather be dead than alive. And so I was making these plans in a very pragmatic way. The only thing that kept me going was my kids. And of course, and I'm so far removed from that. I'm happy with life.
Yeah. Right. You're on the other side of it now.
I'm on the other side of it, but
dude, how man, I just want to sit on that for a second. Like, your kids, that was your lifeline, and like, I've been there. Like, I've had struggles with business. I had the divorce, and my daughter, I was in a similar situation where I felt like I was losing it all. And that contemplation came across my mind as well. And there was a moment I just went driving, and I just kept driving until, I ended up in super far away. My phone's going off. My family didn't know where I was going. I never shared this on the show before. And I just kept driving. I didn't really have a game plan. I just knew I kind of was running from the situation, literally not thinking about it. Right. Because I just found out that the divorce was going to go through, and I wasn't going to see my daughter as much as I wanted. And so my body didn't know what to do. I just ran. I ran from the emotion. And so I eventually had to deal with it. But yeah, like through the hardest parts of business, when things weren't going good in the early days of my company, the thing that always centered me was I knew my daughter was looking forward to seeing me. I was looking forward to seeing her on the weekend or not. We did Tuesday dinner dates. So like you get yourself invigorated in that. And you don't want to put them in a position where the energy needs to come from them necessarily, but like the love is what fuels your new purpose of this is what I'm focused on, which is an incredible thing. And I'm glad that you had that realization is, hey, you know what? My ex, she doesn't control me anymore. My old business and this court case doesn't control me. I can control if I'm a great dad or not. And so you were able to go and do that. And I know we don't always do our best, but every day we try to do our damn best, right?
And I appreciate that. My kids never saw me drunk.
Yeah.
They never saw me, at least in the divorce. Back when me and my wife were still together, there's things that unfortunately, I think my son might remember. But in terms of,
but
my
again,
drinking
you could
habits.
have totally handled that the other way, like many guys do. They are caught up in it all.
And that's the only thing I'm proud of is that I showed up for my kids. And there were days in that period, I haven't even told you all of it yet. Another part of that story is that this is something that I found happens with people who have been through some traumatic stuff. And it happens, and I know it because this was my experience, and I found out that it's happened to other vets. There were things from my time in the military that I thought that were put to bed, that I thought that I had dealt with and I had processed. And because of all this shit that was going on, it came back.
It triggered it or whatnot. Yeah.
It triggered it. And that's very common. I don't want to own that as a service member because it happens to anyone who's been through some heavy shit or some traumatic shit.
Yeah.
Or that quote unquote PT, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But, that came back too, and I had an experience in the gym. I was working out in the gym, my favorite gym in Sarasota at the time. Now I moved, so I'm still same franchise, but I had this memory come back out of the blue as I'm training weights. And I just broke down. And this was in all that. This was during that same time. Mm-hmm. And I broke down and I was almost in the fucking fetal position in the gym at rush hour, and I called another veteran who is a lawyer and helps vets get their benefits. He got me out of that situation, but it was so I was that came back as well. So it was like I was dealing with this stuff, and then that came back as well, which is I found out is common.
I mean, you literally had just the weight was, I don't know how to put a word to it. Like tremendous isn't the right word. You just had so much weight on you. I mean, the math on it is, what do you think is going to happen? If you put all this weight on someone, there's no way they're not. You talked about fighting a battle you can't win. Like this is putting you in a situation where most people don't come out alive with all that going on. You see it. It's a horrible situation, whether it's divorce, bankruptcy, business failures. There's a lot of stories. I'm sure if you do your research, you'll see a lot of people aren't here today to talk about it because they've, taken the easy way out, I guess you could say, the cowardly way out. You didn't do that. So I just want to say, dude, I'm super proud of you, man. I know you got a great thing going with your kids. So talk about the next step in business. What was your next win after the brewery?
Yeah. So, so I will go, and so.
By the way, I want to say, it takes a lot of balls and just being authentic, like you just were on the last few minutes of this show. This is why I love doing the show, because we get real on Mic'd Up. This is not like I said, you come on and promote your thing. We do that, but Mic'd Up is about the deep dive. It's about, getting to know the person. But I'm not able to do that if someone just gives me surface level. So the fact that you just were able, like, willing to get authentic like that and, vulnerable. I think that's an incredible thing. And like, I learned from what you just said. There's gonna be a lot of people learning from what you just said, and I appreciate you doing that.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. And, and one of the things that I learned, and I would never wish that again, and to be on myself or anyone.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I found out, and again, I know you haven't asked me about this, but one of the things that I become so passionate about is just the lessons of failure. And it was in that failure that, holy shit, man, I learned so much, not just about myself, but about others and about humanity. And, when I was down like that, I had one of my very best friends, a guy I had, we were never deployed together, but, I talked him out of, I helped console him after firefights, and we had shared experiences together that he and I will never disclose to anyone. And, nothing too bad, but just some crazy off-the-wall shit you do as a young soldier in your 20s.
Those things are supposed to be kept in me and him are the only two people on this planet that know that happened.
that was a guy who I had, spent probably 20 years or so with all over the world. And he walked out of my life. No idea why. Actually, I should say
this
now.
Is while you were on the comeback?
Like, this was while I was while I was going through all of that.
This is why you're going through it. So
he checked out.
Dude.
And, and at the same time, though, people who I thought were just acquaintances, some of these people were calling me and just checking in on me to make sure I was okay. And it's like,
you found out who your real friends were in that moment.
You learn that in failure.
Yeah. Did you ever read the book? I believe it's called The Power of Failure by Fran Tarkenton.
No, I know who Fran Tarkenton is.
Fran, the quarterback, but also he's run multiple successful businesses as well.
Yeah.
That was one of the books when I started Social Chameleon and became an entrepreneur. It was one of the first books I read, Power of Failure. I got to definitely go back to it. Like you said, you don't just read a book once. But yeah, I would read Power of Failure, recommend anyone reads that. And plus, like you said, you're in the process of writing your own book about failure. So,
and that's one of the chapters in Business Shit. Another plug is when you fail, I hope you fail hard, because, the greater, and if you're a Napoleon Hill person, any adversity has got that, the greater the adversity, the greater potential. It has that much potential to be a learning lesson and something positive.
Impactful.
And
that's an interesting thing. It's almost like a slingshot. Like if you launch it so far in one direction, it's going to come back further in the other direction, I guess. Or maybe boomerang is a better analogy. But I think you're right, because I think if you're hurting, but you're just kind of okay, like you're getting your butt kicked here and there, but you're winning a little bit, you kind of just float, right? You're like floating. But if you're floating in a swimming pool, I'm floating. I got to make sure I don't sink, because sinking's bad. But now put someone in a shark-infested tank and put them in there. Now that shit got real, right? So because your beatdown is so bad, like your come up had so much energy of, now you were just freaking inspired. You had those haters in your mind. You had everything. You had your family you were fighting for, and you're just like, now you're going to get bigger. And it's almost like the, and I'm not saying this about you in particular. Obviously, it looks like you're fit. You're on the football team. But it's almost like you pick on that nerdy kid, right, in 9th grade or 6th grade or something. But all he does, you don't know this, and they spend the rest of their life working out. They're fit. They're crazy. They're smart. And they start a business. Now they're like the successful entrepreneur. And it's like the biggest FU, because everyone picked on that little kid. And all he did is spend his time and energy bettering himself. Now the bully, you look at the bully, and it's like you said, that guy, the 20-year-old, that's now he's 50 years old, but he still has the mentality of a 20-year-old. While the other guy is further ahead in life because he spent all that time on self-belief.
Well, that is my story. So,
there you go. Okay.
When I talk about my mom, we started this with my mom.
Yeah.
I didn't go into the same school twice until the 7th grade. And that was because that's when I finally moved in with my dad. Now, when I was with my mom, my mother was poor, but we were in the East Bay of, San Francisco Bay Area, East Bay.
Yeah.
And my mom, she put me in these affluent schools, and she did it because she thought it would be a good influence on me.
Mm-hmm.
But as you might guess, what that did was it just made me feel less than. So here I was, I was a new kid.
Mm-hmm.
I was poor, and she doesn't like to admit that, but we were poor. I was new. I was wearing the Target clothes when Target was not a cool place. Now my kids love fucking Target, but like kids were shopping in Nordstrom.
The early days of Target, so I know what you're talking about.
And kids were shopping. The kids I was going to school were shopping in Nordstrom,
right?
And so so I was wearing the cheap clothes.
Yeah.
I was the new kid. I was poor. Oh, and by the way, I was fucking chubby and unathletic.
Okay.
So, and so I remember liking the cute girls that didn't like me and liked the other guys. And I was picked dead last, and I was on the outside looking in. And so for me, what that did was it did birth this chip on my shoulder that I have to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people will say, a lot of people without my spirit or with my sort of approach to things will say, well, you need to let that at bay. You need to sort of exercise that demon. No, I fucking like that chip on my shoulder. I do. Yeah. It's
what I think of it as, Jeremy, is like a lot of people say motivation. I don't love the word motivation because to me, motivation is a drill sergeant yelling at someone doing 25 push-ups, 50 push-ups, and you're just doing the push-up so this guy's not yelling at you, or the gym coach who's just, yelling at you for one more rep. That's it. You're motivated for that 5 seconds that you got to finish the thing. Inspiration is what you had. You were inspired. You had to make changes. You had to do things differently. You were inspired because your environment wasn't accepting you. And you're like, well, guess what? I'm going to make myself someone who you're going to want to be with. You're not going to want to live without hanging out with me, right? So you really were inspired.
Yeah, and I was picked on by the school bullies, and then what happened was I moved in with my dad, and I hit puberty. My dad was, he was middle class, but we lived in an upper class neighborhood in Bennett Valley, California,
mm-hmm.
in Santa Rosa, and so, but I became athletic. And all of a sudden I lose the weight and I get muscles.
You
and
found
girls
your
start
thing.
noticing me.
Yeah.
And now I'm good at sports all of a sudden, you know? And so my complete thing was it completely changed from being this poor, chubby, new kid to being this athletic,
Stud.
kid that the girls now were taking notice of. And I was in a, I was good at sports. So that was my
became your identity.
Popularity.
Yeah.
But that chip on my shoulder, people thinking they're better than me, or people telling me, or any time there's an influence or a force that says I can't do something, it really lights a fire under my ass to go out and prove that I can. And it's honestly that I think it comes from that feeling less than and being picked on. And I think that's what created this wonderful drive that I have inside of myself. And I think, and you're right, a lot of people will talk about that, and it's true. And it's like, smarter, more emotionally intelligent people than me will say, Jeremy, you got to, exercise that demon or let that go. But I'm like, no, fuck it. I want people to think they're better than me. I want people to think that I can't do it. I don't want to ever not feel like I was that left out kid when I was young.
Yeah.
Because it gives me that edge. I get up at 5 a.m. and I work and I'm in a constant competition, and I don't even know who the hell I'm competing against. It's true.
It stems from that original moment of feeling less than, and then you were solving for that. But that's what happened. Then you won so much that you almost forgot who you were at the beginning. And that wasn't your fault, but your environment was. Remember, you said I was winning.
Oh,
when I hit failure for that first time, you were so blindsided by it because you were so far removed from being that little kid getting picked on.
Well, yeah, and even then, I had never experienced failure on any level, any fucking level. I had experienced failure, and then my failure's on the goddamn front page of the newspaper.
Right.
The first time I ever really experienced it in the middle of COVID, I'm going through it. I mean, it just devastated me and it turned me upside down emotionally in every way. And I'd like to, I came through it.
Right.
But I'm not proud of how I came through it in every respect. I'm proud that I showed up for my kids.
You still you're still close with your kids?
Oh God. My children are my world. They are my absolute world.
I love that, man. That's great. And then what about your mom?
Oh, my mom's my ride or die.
Okay.
My mother is my.
What was she like during? We just talked about that, really the lowest to the low moment. Did she know?
She knew everything.
Okay.
I there was a couple of times, I don't know if it was the same trip. There's some really powerful things that happened there in terms of my relationship with my mom during that time. I remember one time she came down, and she walked into my apartment at the time. It was a luxury apartment downtown Sarasota in the biggest unit, there, and just fucking destroying myself, holding myself up there. And my mom walked in and she looked around at my place and it was, completely a wreck. And she goes, "Is this it? Is this what you've become?"
Wow.
And I was just like, and that just, so that was one, and, so she came and did that, and that woke me up. And then another thing, two of the other most important significant things. One is in my book. And that's when, I'd been supporting myself since I was 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Never needed help. Had always done extremely well.
Yeah, self-sufficient.
And, and was always, I never needed my mom for anything, once from the time I was 19 years old. I never, emotionally she was there, and we had a great relationship, but I never needed my mom. And at one point during that, I called my mom. I said, "Mom, I need you. Like, I need you to come down." And it was one of those points where I was suicidal most of the time, but I think I probably was a little more so at that time. I couldn't, so I get down there and my mom says to me, she goes, "Thanks for letting me finally take care of you."
Mm.
And man, that just, that was so significant to me. My mom was grateful to take care of me.
Yeah.
When, and it was just, and
but
I'm
you
going
had to allow, you had to allow it. You were the man, and she just said, "Thank you for allowing me to finally get in here to do this," because
to take care of you,
you were putting the blockade up of, I'm this, I don't want to have to do, I don't want to, almost, it's a thing we got, a pride that you just had to swallow it for a moment to get back on your feet again.
And it was beautiful. I just thought it was beautiful that my mom, she looked at it as an opportunity to finally take care of her son, who had been fiercely independent his entire life. And here I was almost, I was 40 years old and this happened. And the other thing is that, my whole, since I was a 2-bedroom apartment, my kids had one, and they didn't have any 3 bedrooms in that place. It was it was 1,600 square feet, but my kids had their room. I had my room. So since I was in college or even in the Army, when my mom would visit and she'd come stay with me, if I didn't have another room, I would put her in my bed and I would go sleep on the couch. And, and I had not for months been able to sleep during this period. I could not sleep. It was insomnia almost every single night.
Yeah.
My mom came, and I remember there was one night I was so uncomfortable on the couch. I went in there and she was in my bed. I had a king bed, and I'll admit, and I laid down next to my mom, and I'll never sleep in the same bed as my mom.
Well, yeah.
That's not since I was a kid, but I was so tired. I just said, screw it. I went and I laid next to her and I fell asleep. And it was the first night I fell asleep in months and ever since then I was able to sleep again. But it wasn't until my mom came down and she was there and I didn't cuddle with my mother or anything, but I laid in the bed next to her. I fell asleep.
It's the comfort of her being there. It's not anything weird. It's just you finally had that comfort again. Everyone was kicking your ass. Here's the one person in the world that's never going to turn on you. You just were able to close your eyes and take an exhale for a moment. That's the first time in months. Yeah.
That was a great way of putting it. And that's exactly it. And, through that time and so about a year ago,
my mom, by the way, during my lowest points was that same person for me, dude. So I'm getting emotional just thinking about it. I wouldn't be here today where I am, or the business wouldn't have survived without my mom taking me under her wing again, just saying, let's get your feet underneath. And she didn't have to say those things, but she just physically, I was there too, dude. Our stories are almost weirdly, incredibly, I didn't have the military background or any of that, but yeah, we have a lot of common denominators, which, by the way, you are breaking a record. I know there's some, before we actually started the episode, we recorded for a few minutes, but this is now the longest mic'd up episode of all time.
Oh, shit.
So I do want to make sure we're just mindful to get back on track here. And I do have to run in a second, but I just want to do this. We're going to give some love. I want to give some love to our sponsors, so they remain our sponsors. But number one is Social Chameleon. As you know, that's my podcast agency, socialchameleon.us. That is who produces this show. That is my company. That is my passion in life. I just love the storytelling and how people come together and learn from podcasts. So that's why I started this business back in 2017. In the early days, we weren't even doing podcasting. And eventually I said, this is the lane I want to run in. So socialchameleon.us, transform your podcast. Check that out if you guys are interested in launching a show, or if you have a show and you want to make it even better, transform your podcast. Socialchameleon.us. Also, we're recording this on riverside.fm. They're one of our affiliates. I love Riverside. It's the only company right now that I trust to do my podcast. And I'm not saying that because they're an affiliate. I reached out to them to do that because I believed in them. Same thing with Libsyn. Libsyn is libsyn.com. And that is how we do the audio distribution. So if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, that's how we got it there for you. And this is just my reminder, my quick 2 seconds to say, if you're liking the episode, you love the content, if you're an hour and a half into this interview and you're still with us, thank you for being here. And if you're watching us on YouTube, remember to hit that like, hit that subscribe so you get more content just like this when it comes out. Put your notifications on so you know when I have more great guests, just like Jeremy. All right, going back to my notes, I wanted to hit on something there over the last couple minutes. Yes, here it is. Common misconception. So there's a lot of, like we said, early stage entrepreneurs tuning in that may be a little green and they're not sure, like entrepreneurship sounds so good, it looks so good, and all the painted pictures of success. What are some misconceptions that you'd like to tell them about that you wish the audience knew before they even made the leap? And like, if you can go back in time and teach yourself this, you would.
Oh God.
Where do we begin? Here's another hour and a half.
I'm just trying to get so many. It's like, how do you, I would say one is, you have no idea how all-encompassing it's going to be in your life until you do it. If you're a small business, and if you are starting this thing out and you haven't done, especially if you started a business before, starting a business, unless you're just fucking rich and loaded and you can not be profitable or not worry about the bottom line for as long as it takes, this is going to take all of your life, and it's going to take up all of your time, and it's going to take up all of your focus, and it's going to take up all of your attention. And when I say that, so that's something you need to know about, is that this is going to fucking own you. The business owns you, when you're starting out, you don't, if you care about it, and your ass is on the line, the business fucking owns you. And the lights go out in the middle of the night. There's a fire alarm in the middle of the night. There's something happened with your ingredients and you're not sure how you're going to get your ingredients, or, some big check didn't come in and you got payroll tomorrow and you got, 15 people who need to get paid. These are the things that you can't prepare yourself for. But what I would say is, because one is that, first of all, it's going to take up all your time. It's going to take up all your time. It's going to take up your life. And so that's lesson number one. Lesson number two is that when you go into it, you need to go into it with a commitment that you're not going to abandon your immediate family or your personal relationships with your wife, your spouse, or your children.
Yeah, that's great.
And I made that mistake, and there were other reasons. I mean, that wasn't the only reason for the marriage's demise, but I did not, what I tell people now is, you need to be intentional about carving out time for your kids, for your spouse, because they deserve it.
For yourself too, your own mental.
Well, yeah, you're right. And I think that too. But especially for, you need to give the people in your life the attention that they need. Your wife or your spouse. My puppy's back there, making noises.
I thought you had a bird for a second. It sounded like a parakeet.
She's adorable. But your partner deserves your attention.
Yeah.
And
it's that reminder, Jeremy, of why are you doing it all in the first place? Is for them to thrive. The people you love, you want to see them do great, and you can do great things with them because you got this business and you want that to do great for its own reasons and mission and vision. But at the end of the day, you want to take care of your family to the best of your ability. And then if you create this business, which many people do, that consumes them, then you look back, you're like, I'm not even doing the things I want with the people I love, and I should be doing spend more time with.
And let's take that. Let's go down that rabbit hole a little bit. And I guess you could say I have a bit of an addictive personality anyway. But entrepreneurs, I think we get fucking addicted to what we do. It's a fucking turn on.
Yeah.
And these wins or these obstacles or it's an addiction of sorts.
I've never heard it.
And so
I never heard it said like that, but I agree 1000%. Yeah, I've definitely experienced that as well.
It turns me on. I'm working my ass off for something that I'm fully engaged in and that I am going to own 100% of the success or failure is an addiction for me. Mm-hmm. And it's a turn on and it consumed me. Yeah. And I don't think that's just my addictive like you said. I think that's something that us entrepreneurs we can fall into that trap. And as much as a lot of, and another thing that I want to say too, and this is, and thank you for asking me this. This is another important lesson to me. And this is an important lesson that I want. And I imparted this in business shit. And I really wrote business shit. I wanted to show all sides, the good, the bad, and the in-between. And I wanted it to be something where people could look as a sort of manual and say, if I do this is going to maybe help me go either way. But one of the things that I want to tell people is that, one, it's okay not to be an entrepreneur. We're not all cut out for this shit. And I don't want to say cut out like it's like we're cut above. You just got to be a little fucking crazy.
You got to be crazy because you talked about adversity hitting. It's inevitable. I don't care who you are, how much, if you went to business school, you didn't go to business school, you start with money, you don't start with money. You got investors, you don't have investors. You got a mom that believes in you, you don't have a mom who believes in you. Adversity is going to kick your ass. And like, it takes that crazy to be a fighter. Like you said, though, you also have to navigate some battles aren't worth fighting because it's a waste of time and money or energy and just steers in the wrong direction. But like, you have to have that crazy of when everything's going wrong, only one person typically in the whole world is going to believe that it's going to go right. And it's the leader of that organization, which is typically the founder. And all the businesses, I'll tell you what, you can name any business right now that is successful. The only reason they are successful today, not only reason, but the primary reason is that they didn't give up. That founder, somebody along the line didn't give up, because 100% they won't exist if you give up, right? So like every single successful business has a common denominator, and it's that they never gave up.
And that's an important, very important point, and there's a story in Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, what I mentioned earlier, which I call it the Entrepreneur's Bible, where this guy had I think it was some sort of mine, and it was some sort of, raw materials. It was a mine. Mm-hmm. This guy, and he dug and he dug and he dug and he dug and he dug, and he finally said, fuck it, I'm done. And he sold it. The guy that bought it behind him dug like a couple feet and struck the riches. Because
the guy was 97% of the way there before he sold it.
That's right. And so you're always, but what I want to say about that is that you're not guaranteed to win.
Right.
And it's like, and not only are you not guaranteed to win, because that happened to me. I did everything the gods of business said I was supposed to do to guarantee success. I threw everything on the line.
Hold on. I'm going to correct you, though. I'm going to correct you. I don't like to correct my guests, but in this,
go ahead.
I'm going to freaking correct you. You said you lost, right? Or you use the word you don't always win. You failed. You didn't lose. You failed. Now you're on to the next thing you win. The only way you lose is if you quit. You didn't
That's
quit.
right.
Did you quit?
No, and I think that's great.
I don't see a quitter on the screen.
No, you're absolutely right. But
yeah, you didn't quit. So like my little quick lesson to people tuning in is like, yes, Jeremy, he failed. That whatever he went through, COVID hit, the divorce hit, the lawyers hit, the distributors kicked his ass. Fine. So you failed. You picked yourself up off the mat. You took care of your kids in the process, which is super commendable. And you're freaking here to talk about it. You did not quit.
No, I appreciate
or
that.
lose.
No,
you didn't lose.
I appreciate that. And you're absolutely right. And that's a good reminder even for me. And you're right. But, that was a hard one for me, was that I felt like I did everything for JDubs. I felt like I did everything I was supposed to do. If I followed,
you did.
I followed
you didn't
the
do
laws.
anything wrong, probably. But like that business, for whatever reason, it failed. And so it just wasn't. Maybe just look at it. It wasn't meant to be. I do believe in that stuff. Like the whole wasn't meant to be. That life lesson happened for you. So, like people can be defined by a moment of failure because then they give up or they just keep going back to it. You could say, shit, this stuff keeps happening to me. No, it happened for you because now with that lesson, you can go and rock out the next business and you're not going to make the same mistake with a distributor or whatever it might look like. It could be a whole different line of business.
Yeah.
Now you're while you're successful in your next thing, and I'm not trying to preach to you because I know you know this already, but like the audience right now, feel this. As Jeremy's going and rocking out his next thing, guess what he's going to do? He's going to be more present with his family and the person he loves. I don't know if you're in a new relationship, whatever that looks like. You're going to spend the time with the people you love and make sure your mom's part of it too, like you already do. So that's the beautiful thing about the failure, which sounds like a whole reason you're writing the second book, right?
Yeah. Well, no, it is. And so, but I will say this, and this is something that I say that a lot of entrepreneurs don't. If it's costing you your happiness, walk away. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's not a flippant like, oh, fuck, I hate this, I'm done, throwing the towel bullshit. No, it's a lot of deliberation and it's a lot of soul searching. But if someone is an entrepreneur and they decide that they understand that it's affecting their real happiness, and you are not happy being an entrepreneur, or you are not, and it's affecting your life too much in a negative way, there's nothing wrong with walking away. That's awesome. That's important. And I think that, we don't, us entrepreneurs who are committed to this, right? I'm wired this way. I'm fucking wired this way.
We just keep going until we can't go anymore.
I will stop. I will stop until you take the last breath out of me. Yeah. And you know what I mean? I will. I'm part crazy. I'm part stupid. I'm part, that's me. I'm wired for that. But not everyone is, and
why fight for it if you're not even fighting for something you're happy about? If you're not happy,
if you're not happy, and I think that's important. Whether you started business, you never started it, but if it's not something that fuels your fire, your passion for life, walk the fuck away. Yeah, and that's and a lot of entrepreneurs will say, again, we're the same mindset. No, you got to fucking stay the course. You've got to stick it out. You've got to be committed no matter what. Yeah. You are the lesson. But I will say, not everyone is us. And I believe to my core, if it is affecting your happiness or interfering with your greater good, and you are certain of that, and you've made absolute certain of that, walk the fuck away.
I agree. I want to say I 1,000% agree with that. And I'll still also say, to my other point, that's also not quitting. You're walking away from a situation. You're not stopping altogether and turtling up for the rest of your life and just saying, I'm going to go back to the man or whatever. No, guess what? Your thing, maybe you want to be a school teacher. I'm just making this up. A police officer, a firefighter, whatever, like where you go back to a W-2 position, but you're passionate and that's what you feel called to do. then that's great. It doesn't have to be an entrepreneurship thing that you do, but just go back and be connected and be the greatest person that you can to go do that next thing, right? So I still would say, yeah, if you walk away from something, you're not quitting on yourself. You're realizing that the thing you're fighting for no longer is the right thing for you to fight for. So you just got to change a little bit of what you're doing. That's all. Change direction. Yeah.
And that's my last chapter in the book is called Knowing When It's Time to Tap Out.
There you go.
And I start with Theodore Roosevelt's his speech, Citizen in a Republic, the man in the ring or the man in the arena. And I start with that. And and it's like, I like to fill people with a little bit of pride and a little bit of encouragement. And this book, as wild and crazy and all the other shit that you would call me and the way I approach this.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be encouraging. I wanted to encourage people no matter what path they decide or what choice they decide to make in business. And that's even for the people who've gotten into business, decided to go out. But what I said is that, you stepped onto the back. I said, let me just see if this isn't some moral victory. You had the intestinal fortitude to go out and dare do with your life what you always dreamed of doing. You left the comfort of the 9-to-5 and went out on your own to build your own business on your own shoulders. Regardless of the balance sheet, that makes you a lion and a warrior. You stepped onto the battlefield, into the arena. There's no shame in whatever you do next. I assure you, you're better because of this chapter of your life. You've learned valuable lessons that will make you a better employee if you go that route, a manager, or even a business owner. And so, and there's more to it than that, but that's the encouragement that I want to provide people and give people. And again, my lessons learned from failure. And that's, if this is really something that isn't serving your greater good, there's no shame in walking away. And especially if you did it, you fucking did it.
Yeah.
And just the fact that you went out there and stepped into the arena and had the fucking courage. And what we talked about earlier, your friends are going to call you an idiot. And these are well-intentioned people. Even the most well-intentioned people will make you second guess yourself because they don't know any better or they doubt themselves. The haters are going to come out of the fucking woodwork, especially, and I talk about that in the book. It's like, now I look at haters as encouragement because that tells me I'm winning. When people aren't talking about you or talking shit, you're not winning anymore.
You're not doing anything worth talking about.
So,
hating on. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, but you had the fucking courage to go out and risk everything you worked for, potentially to risk your reputation, to put your fucking mental welfare and well-being on the line, your own health, your mental and physical health. But you went out and did it. And no one, and it's like me, like with the military, no one can ever take away what I did. I will die in a fucking coffin or whatever it is. No one can ever took away what I did in the military.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's mine. And I say that, to anything that you do, and even as an entrepreneurship, you may step away, but you fucking did it. And that's something to be extremely proud of. And so, and then that's a lesson, your question, knowing when it's time to it's okay to walk away under the right circumstances. And you're not a quitter. Like you said, you're just someone who said, this isn't for my greater good.
Yeah.
This is not what's meant for me. I did it. Now I'm going to go do something else. And there is no fucking shame in that.
Amen.
And that's a lesson.
I think that's a great period on the end of the sentence for this conversation. This conversation's not over, though. I'm going to have you on the show again. When your next book comes out, I'll definitely have you on. We'll talk all about it, but it doesn't have to be until then. I got so many things I was prepared to talk to you about today we didn't get to, but that's okay because we're not following a script. You and I followed just a conversation with two dudes talking about life, business, life going through divorce, family. There's a lot of great things here that I think people can chew on. And this is one of my favorite conversations. I'm not just blowing smoke but this is one of my favorite interviews I've ever done on the show because of how real we got today. I think a lot of times our conversations on the show are real, but there's a little dancing around like, well, maybe we don't go all the way there. We just kind of get to the next thing, and that's cool. But we really got all in, and I even shared things, like I said, that I never shared with anybody. And
thank you for that.
Only
Mike.
like three or four people
thank
probably
you for
know.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, dude. I'm sorry to interrupt you, and you're the host, and this is your show, but that took courage for you to do that, and that's real, man. And so good job, and thank you.
Yeah, I just think in that moment, I wanted you to know, like, I've been there. I know that freaking feeling. Yeah. Dude, this is so good. I want to continue offline, support you, be friend, be that person on the phone. If you're in a moment where you need to call someone that's just going to listen and understand. And the thing too is when you call someone who needs help, that, I think a lot of times people try to fix, and they don't always need a fix. They need someone to just talk to, right?
Yeah, and just to listen.
Just to listen,
yeah,
and to try to understand and just to feel where they're at, So, man, there's a lot that I learned from this conversation, and a lot of times I do go back and listen to an episode way after it came out, because the reason for that is I don't want to hear myself talk or anything like that, but there's things that I forgot about. You talked about Napoleon Hill's book, the guy he was like 97% of the way there and he turned around. Digging gold, whether that's a true story, analogy, whatever. I know that's in the book. I read that book twice. I forgot about that. Okay. So you just brought it up. Yeah. So the reason it's good to come back to these conversations is, like, there's a lot that's going to be talked about. We're going to go our ways and do our thing. And sometimes stuff gets forgotten about. So that's why I love that podcasts are recorded. You can go back to them. They're conversational. They're educational. This was a freaking great conversation. I always like to end every episode with two things: be great in all that you do, and then be grateful. And I'm just super grateful for you being here. I'm going to give you the floor. Any last things you want to talk about before we do go our two separate ways, before I get you back on the show again?
No, dude, honestly, I mean, this has just been such a great time. I'm glad you enjoyed it so much. I've been sitting here the whole time going, Jesus, I hope I'm making sense. Yeah. With all this shit that I'm saying, but thank you. No, look, man, no, this has been amazing, and just thank you so much. And I just hope, like you said, and the reason why you do this and giving back, like, why I really wrote business shit for other people, and I really hope that in my book and also in this podcast, that if we just affected one person, that's it. Or we resonated with one person, and if we didn't even hit that mark, and some people just fucking enjoy it, I'm happy. Me too. And so I had that perspective when I was in a band. I'm a drummer. So I played in clubs in front of 3 people, in front of, a few thousand people, and everywhere in between. I always had that mentality: if one person's out here tonight and they just are loving life because they're listening to our music, then it was worth me lugging my drums through the smudge or the snow in the Buffalo snowstorms, playing in front of 2 or 3 people. It's worth it for me to know that one person's impacted. Obviously, we want more people. That's more power. That's more, and I know that your story today, and I appreciate you sharing, it's going to impact more than one person. But this is just a really, really great conversation, because I said the word earlier, inevitable. I do believe it. These things are going to happen to people. It's inevitable. How do you get through it? How do you continue to push forward? And then also know when it's time to, hey, why am I fighting for something I don't need to be fighting or don't even believe in anymore? That's super important to know when to pull the plug. What a great conversation, dude. Just appreciate you. So I got one last question for you. All this conversation, what you did in the past, things that you learned from, what about the future? Where do you want to go? What's your big, audacious entrepreneurial goal in the moment, as I ask you that question? This could change probably 10 times in the next 10 years, but now. You have to say in the moment. So listen, my what I will do before I die is direct feature films. Okay. I'm a film guy. I love film. I love writing. I mean, I didn't even know I was a fucking writer. Yeah. Now I'm talking about my second book. I got business shit out. But I'm writing several film scripts that I've had to step back from while I'm doing these businesses. Yeah. Right now it's digital marketing. It's Lux Media for dentists, cosmetic surgeons. And I'm taking a totally different approach to how I'm doing it. I'm taking, and I won't talk much about it other than I'll say that traditional digital marketing is what we're doing. And I have great people who are fantastic at what they've done, who I've teamed up with for it. But I'm also bringing my understanding of business and branding and marketing and business principles. And what I am going to try to do, what I think is a little different than a lot of agency owners, is to use my experience and to leverage other people's experience to come in and help my clients grow their bottom line. not just through digital marketing, but teach them some other business principles or new business principles or new things that they can do to grow their bottom line and be more successful in the short and long term. And so I'm calling it a 360 approach. So I'm really excited about Lux Media and really getting behind and treating these people like entrepreneurs and treating them like brands and helping them become better business owners and make more money.
Yeah.
Outside of traditional digital marketing. And that's sort of my secret sauce. Lux Media. I'm also writing, I'm also starting the second book, but I'm doing so much cool shit, man. I'll just keep going. And but ultimately I want to direct feature films. I'll be getting my skydiving certification here pretty soon. And I want to do fun stuff with that. So yeah, it's just but right now it's Lux Media and it's writing my books. The next one is on failure. And I will say, you reminded me, I opened that. I've written the introduction in chapter 1. But just like with that, I think failure is something, it's not taboo anymore, thank God. But it's still not, I dare say, celebrated. And I really think that failure should almost be celebrated. I think it should be taught in schools as something that, hey, this is going to happen and to be prepared for. And not in a bad way, but to where, wouldn't it be great as a society? And again, I speak in generalities. Wouldn't it be great as a society if someone fails, and they know that it's coming, maybe they're somewhat prepared for it because they've been taught to deal with it. They don't look at it as the end of the world. And you are able to say to that person and maybe even them themselves, okay, I failed. Now, what am I going to learn? What are the lessons I'm going to take from them? Where are the lessons and what am I going to learn from this? Yeah. Because it's a wonderful opportunity. It's a fucking horrible opportunity, but it's wonderful.
Dude, I just saw two of my favorite athletes of all time are Michael Jordan and Derek Jeter. And Jordan's thing is he talks about his reasons for success was because he took, 9,000 shots, right? And they all weren't game winners, right? He took the shots, and after he missed a shot, he took the next shot and he kept going. And that's why he won, because he failed over and over and over again. He missed, he failed. He didn't hit every game winner. But the next game winner that was on the line and they passed him the ball, he's shooting it confidently because he believed he was going to get it in every time. Derek Jeter was just at, I forget where he was, but he was at a commencement ceremony, like a graduation, right? And his big thing was on failure, about like the fact that you're doing it, you're putting it all out there. As a baseball player, the best player in the league fails 65-70% of the time, right?
If you get on base half the time you're on bat, you're the greatest ball player of all time. You're hitting 500.
Right. Judge right now leads the league with like a 410 batting average, and that's freaking crazy. Anything like over 300 in baseball is good. So literally 70% failure rate, and you're considered amazing. So that's what you're talking about, is like, how come we don't look at people in life like, if they're a 70% failure rate, why are we not commending it? Because in business, if you failed, if 3 of your 10 businesses were grand slams, like, you'd be an all-star. And that's about right. If you think about, I'm sure if you did the math and you looked at the greatest entrepreneurs of all time that have most people have 7-8 different, when I say most people, I'm talking about like the high, achiever billionaire. They have like on average 7 different sources of income that they're doing. So right there's 7, but there's probably on every 7 that's winning, there's 3, or there's another 10 that's failing, whatever. The math adds up, right? So my point is, Jordan and Derek Jeter, their message was the same as yours right there, that like, we need to celebrate that someone's going through it and doing it, and they're on purpose. And if they fail, dude, all right, let's dap you up and let's get you on to the next thing that's going to be your calling in life. And you are called to do this amazing thing because you're the only person that can do it at that level. Funny enough, we also had another thing in common, no surprise, but movie directing. Actually went to school for media production, and I wanted to get more into the movie production side of it. And I ended up getting into kind of the audio video production side of it through, originally I was doing weddings, then businesses and social media, and now podcasting. But there we go. We got another thing. But I want to get back to that as well. So maybe at some point we even work on a production together. That'd be cool. My thing is I'm so focused on Social Chameleon. When I get it to a spot where, you get that entrepreneurial, a little bit of free time you create for yourself. One of my passion projects is going to be doing, whether it's a short film or feature length, I just want to be behind the camera in that aspect again.
You should.
Yeah.
No, you should. And that's important. It fills your cup. Mm-hmm. It fills your cup. And if you're a creative, I believe in that. I have things that I'm going to do and that I do as creative.
Yeah.
And like, for example, one of my short-term goals is to, and I don't think it's going to be this summer because I didn't get Lux Media off the ground and I'm going to produce this, which means pay for it. I've got a travel show that I've written. Mm-hmm. I've written several things, but one's a travel show. I want to go down to the Caribbean and film the pilot for this travel show. Really just because I just want to do it.
Yeah.
I think it's fucking awesome. I think hopefully sell it, but it's like, you just work as a director the whole night, but it's like these little things, and when I talk about skydiving, I want to do some theatrics with the skydiving and stuff that I haven't talked about. So it's, you have to do those things to continue to fulfill you outside of just your business.
Yeah. So good, man. Well, like I said, we could continue this. I'm looking forward to the next conversation. I think it's going to be completely unique to today's convo. You're the man. Like I said, your social media, your website, all the cool stuff you're doing, and business shit is out now on Amazon, and they can also, I think, get it right on your website too. Is that true?
It's on jeremyjoerger.com. And it's all my socials now are at the Jeremy Joerger. So still building those up. Very, very grassroots. Yeah. I can market you and promote you and myself. I'm not good at it.
That's all good.
I'm actually talking to a company right now to maybe help me with that, to do that for me. But at the Jeremy Joerger, and then of course jeremyjoerger.com, and on Amazon, I've got the author page there and all that. So
Jeremy,
man.
Cheers to you. This is my sparkling passion fruit water. I no longer drink. From time to time I'll have a drink, but this is what I'm drinking now. 0 calories, no BS in it. It's just literally water with natural fruit. So cheers to you, my man. You are doing some awesome stuff, and I appreciate the humble attitude behind it. Love to have you on anytime.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. This is great. This has been a great show, and I binged listened to your shows before for the last couple of weeks. I've listened to many of your shows, and they're awesome. So thank you. This is one of my favorite podcasts. Dude, thank you so much.
What a compliment, man. I appreciate it, and just excited. And like I said, we got a mic'd up record here. I don't think anyone's going to touch it for a while. So
I'm a fucking yapper. I'm a fucking yapper, dude.
Me too. And here I am. I'm going to continue with one more thing. Here's a little life lesson. And I don't know, I hit a button and everything disappeared. Okay, here's a cool little lesson for you. When I was young, I was super quiet. I'm the youngest of 3 kids. So I haven't really shared this much on the show too. This is kind of a cool thing. My sister's the oldest. She was always super smart, academic, the whole thing. My brother was the middle child. He was kind of the ham. So like when my mom had back in the 80s, like the shoulder cameras and we're doing Christmas and stuff, my brother's like making everyone who's watching laugh and my parents laugh. I just kind of like hung out, like I'm just kind of in the background, right? Didn't really speak up for myself, wasn't super confident. And then by like middle school, high school, on every report card, it used to say talks too much, too loud in class. He's tapping on his desk. He's getting out there and doing too much. And it's kind of funny. I came out of my shell, and it's no surprise that I have a podcast.
And a great one.
Thank you very much, dude. That does mean a lot. Like I do this because I love it, but I also want to make sure when I produce it and it gets put out into the world that it makes the guests look great too. And you did your part of that. So thank you so much, brother. Be great and be grateful. Grateful for you.